Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining the teaser of my workshop, where we won't speak about C++, but we'll discover rather the so-called soft, but in reality very difficult skills that you need in order to grow in your career. Well, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Sandor Dargo. I'm working senior engineer for Spotify, and I spend most of my free time writing. Um, I post mostly C++ content on my personal blog, but on the dev ladder, I write about exactly the topics that we are going to discuss today. So career growth and soft skills that are so important in our career. Well, I don't want to speak more about myself. We have a limited time, and I must respect it. So here are some details, some practical information about the post-conference workshop. So I'll give 2 sessions for optimized for different time zones, different locations, one in April, one in May. But if they don't fit and there is enough need, I'm sure we'll find other dates as well. But you might ask, why this workshop? Why to speak about non-C++ content at the C++ conference? I've seen many engineers feel stuck after the first few years in their career. They know more, they write better code, they even keep up with the new things. Yet their growth might feel slower. And this usually creates some frustration. Like, what am I missing? Why isn't this enough anymore? Well, the uncomfortable answer is that the gap between junior and senior engineers are usually not about syntax, not even about architecture. It's more about the mindset, the communication, and ownership. And that's exactly what we are going to explore a little bit today, and more in that half a day workshop. And I remember when I was chasing promotion to become a senior engineer for a long time, and managers couldn't really explain what I was missing, what I needed to do. And that's why I think this workshop is important, because I think, like, I've been in the industry for, well, considering the years that I spent as a DBA in a corporation for more than 15 years, and probably I had 2 or 3 managers overall who could explain well what's needed and who cared enough about individuals. So that's quite a rare combination, I think. And well, this workshop can help you with that. But let me ask you a simple question. I know that, well, now you can't really reply, but you can reply in your head. Have you ever delivered exactly what was needed? What was asked, and still it wasn't what was needed? Maybe you implemented the ticket, the test passed, you followed the specs to the letter, and somehow, well, it still missed the mark. Because maybe the requirements changed, or maybe the real problem was different, not exactly what was described in the ticket. And maybe no one clarified the context. They didn't dare, they didn't know that they should have. And I know that this is frustrating. Well, it happens a lot. Maybe less and less as you grow in your career, but in the beginning, definitely more. And we'll explore some questions, techniques that we have to cover in careers, and then it will help us avoiding this frustration. So, the thing is that most engineers don't lack technical skill, especially in a C++ room, in a C++ conference like this one. You probably know just enough templates. You know the depth of performance optimization that you need in your domain. You know the memory model. You probably know more about the language and the syntax than your manager ever will. And yet, some some engineers move from junior to senior relatively fast, while others plateau, and it takes them much longer time, or maybe they never really make it. And the difference is not syntax. It's not the architectural diagrams. It's not how many features of C++ 23, 26, or whatever you memorize. It's what you optimize for. And junior engineers or engineers in the beginning of their career, they optimize often for effort. Whereas as you grow, as you become a senior, you optimize for impact. And that shift from effort to impact changes everything. And today I want to show you a little bit what that shift really looks like. Because remember, you can be technically brilliant and still optimize for the wrong thing in your day-to-day job. So let's speak a little bit about effort and impact. So effort is something that's visible to you, something that you feel, but impact is what visible to everyone else, what their perception is in your organization. So in the beginning, you just want to be correct, but that has to change. You cannot be correct all the time, and what your actual task is, or responsibility is as a senior engineer, is to reduce uncertainty for everyone around you. And you cannot just avoid mistakes. You have to deal with trade-offs. And you have to deal with the risks. A conference came to my mind, a local conference here in the south of France. It was about software testing, and there was someone from a big corporation who said that they analyzed the statistics from their bug management system, and they went through over, I don't know, thousands of tickets, and they realized that most bugs, well, more bugs were coming by senior engineers than by junior ones. And it's not because senior engineers were reckless or they were not as good as managers and others thought they were. No, it was they were taking on the more risky tasks, which is normal. And they took the risks, they tried to manage the risks, but it leads to errors. So at one point, you have to give up the, oh, I must be correct. I cannot be correct all the time. And maybe in the beginning you're just focusing on working hard, and you try to increase your output maybe by 10%, or maybe you even want to double your output. But that you can only do by working harder, maybe working a bit smarter, maybe even longer hours, something I wouldn't really recommend to do unless you can really keep it within some boundaries. But if you want to be impactful, if you really want to grow, well, you have to create leverage for the others. In other words, your work has to enable the others to be more effective. And You don't just want to stay busy, something that in the beginning we find important because that's that's how we somehow prove to the others, to the external world, that we are worthwhile. But we have to deliver impact, maybe in even less time than the others. And when the beginning you just get a ticket and you try to finish and you make sure, oh, okay, I delivered on time. Later, this has to change, and you have to look behind the ticket. You have to think about the real problem. You have to solve the real problem that's underneath a ticket. Let's have a look what optimizing for effort often looks like. It often looks productive when you optimize for effort. It feels sophisticated, but it's often not so impactful. So what do I think about? I think about complex template abstractions that maybe nobody understands in the team, or it's very difficult to understand, or just refactoring everything because the existing solution is so ugly, or using a new language feature without adding clear value to your business case. And this elegance is satisfying, but it's not really valuable. Impact is valuable, and as a senior, you have to optimize more for the outcome, and you care less about the elegance. Now, I'm not saying that senior engineers don't ship elegant solutions, but that elegance is only the byproduct, and that's not what really makes you happy and important. So, what does solving the real problem actually require? Well, let's talk about execution and ownership. Public school trained us for execution. We have to follow instructions. We have to show effort and produce output and avoid mistakes. Otherwise, we got punished. And that somehow makes sense. It makes sense because if you think about it, like the modern school system, it originates from Prussia, from Germany. I think from around the 1860s, 70s, maybe, or maybe a bit earlier. And they had a specific goal. They wanted to basically to produce people who can work reliably well in a factory. You have to follow the instructions, you have to produce output, and you have to avoid mistakes because otherwise what you produce is unusable. But we are not factory workers. Well, at least I hope that our craft requires a bit more creativity. In fact, our industry rewards something else, and something else than execution. And that something else is ownership. So my advice, if I gave you one piece of advice, it would be, be like a few-year-old kid whose soul hasn't been crushed by the school yet, and just ask why, before the how, because that's almost always more important. Let me give you a simple example. I remember that one of my previous jobs, we got a task from a very good product owner. I think he was indeed good. Said that, okay, there's this feature. I don't remember what the feature was, but you have to make it configurable via a database. Okay. Well, you need a database table. That's what it is. what what would most less experienced engineers do? Well, they would create that new table, add plenty of code, and make that work, what the product owner asked for. But as a senior, you better ask some questions. First of all, why? Why do we need especially this type of configurability? Why now? And actually, how fast updates are expected? How often would that database table would be used, or will it be actually used? And maybe can we iterate? So in practice, this what happened? So we asked these questions, and it turned out that well, he thought that that's a good idea because that's very flexible. Didn't really know uh, how fast updates should be or how often would that be used. And actually, we could convince the product owner to give an iterative solution. So what did it look like? First, okay, just to put you in context, this was quite a few years ago, and deploying code to production took about 2 weeks. So we said, okay, we can ship something very fast. We create a small interface. We really just think about the class where you say that we have a function called read configuration or something, and we hard coded the value behind. We shipped it to production, and in the meanwhile, we started to work on a better solution, a more configurable one. We said, okay, we can we can provide very easily a solution where you can make this feature configurable uh, through environment variables. You cannot update it in that environment. You couldn't update it as fast as a database table, but it's better than shipping a new version with hard-coded values to production. So that was the second iteration. And the third iteration would have been creating the database table, which took longer time, and we needed to go through more painful processes. And well, guess what? How fast updates were needed? Well, in the end, it was not used at all. Not the configurability, but even the feature, because the client made up their mind. So why? Keep asking the why, because tickets are interpretations. They are the best interpretations of usually the product owner from the product owner of some problems. But the reality is, are the problems, and if you don't clarify the problem, you might end up building the wrong solution. Maybe you do that perfectly, but you still deliver the wrong solution. So what ownership actually looks like, it's about managing risks. Many engineers strive very hard not to be wrong. And that sounds responsible, not to be wrong. But it's not really ownership. Because avoiding being wrong usually means, staying quiet, following the ticket to the letter, and hoping that, nothing will break. And that protects your ego. But ownership is different. It's about managing the risk. Because as a senior engineer, you don't try to look right. You try to make the system safe. And that means that you surface misaligned expectations early. It means that you ask, are we sure about the timeline? Or you will point out some misaligned expectations. You will point out hidden stakeholders even before they would show up. And it means it's saying that there's a trade-off here. which one actually do we want, and you initiate some discussions where you might be wrong, but you engage with others and you make sure that others express their ideas. Because, well, at the end, avoiding mistakes protects you, but managing the risks, it will protect the team, and that's what is important. Ownership is not about certainty and knowing what you do. It's more about visibility, not your visibility, but the visibility of all these that I was talking about. And when you raise the risks early on, you reduce the uncertainty for everyone else around you. And as I mentioned earlier, that's what senior engineers actually do by uncovering all these communication gaps. So, as I just said, senior engineers reduce uncertainty because that's what it comes down to. And not by knowing everything, not by being the smartest person in the room, but by making things clearer to everyone else around you. You communicate early instead of waiting. You ask better questions instead of just making silent assumptions. You clarify what actually success would look like, and you try to make trade-offs visible instead of pretending that there is no trade-off there. And when something is ambiguous, you don't hide it. You shrink the ambiguity. When something is risky, you don't ignore the risk. You surface it. You point it out. And when something is unclear, you clarify. And that's what builds trust. That's what creates autonomy. And that's what makes managers relaxed when you are on the project. And well, as I mentioned yesterday in my lightning talk, that's also what brings value in the age of agentic coding, because these are the things AI agents are not very good at yet. Senior engineers, well, I'm not saying they don't eliminate uncertainty, but they reduce it. And that's the real shift from execution to ownership. But many engineers can't really do this, and there is a reason behind. Ownership requires thinking space. You can't think like this. You can't think strategically if you are always reacting. Because as I just mentioned, ownership requires thinking space, and often, if we are not very cautious about it, we don't have any thinking space. Because Slack is always open. We review while we code. We answer messages instantly. We say yes to every request, and we might live in actually most of us live in a constant context switching world. And often, to be fair, this feels productive. It feels responsive. It feels valuable. But in reality, this is reactive. You are living in a reactive world instead of a creative one. You cannot manage risks. You cannot think in systems. You cannot clarify ambiguity because your brain is constantly interrupted. It's almost like fried. The always on engineers, they look busy. But if you want to be an impactful engineer, you must protect your focus. And because deep thinking is not accidental. It requires boundaries. And if you don't protect your attention very aggressively, you will optimize for responsiveness, and that will not help you in the long run. In it, The full workshop will discover some techniques about what to do and how to communicate that with your team to protect your focus and actually to protect theirs as well, because good examples spread quickly. So remember this: you can't think deeply, you can't think in systems if you live in notifications. It's worth remembering that being busy is not the same as being impactful. Business feels productive because you are moving, you're doing something all the time. You're replying, you're reviewing, you're fixing, attending, answering. But activity is not the same as value. And as a junior, you often measure your worth by how hard you work. But when it comes to more senior engineers, you have to measure your work by the impact of the decisions. And for that, you have to protect your focus. Sometimes you have to say no. Sometimes, you have to choose leverage where you will make others more productive by doing something small but something very important. You have to optimize for that, and sometimes you have to block out longer times from your calendar, and you put yourself to do not disturb, and you you know you take that time to think for the longer run. And looking at the time, I wanted to share a personal story here, but well, I'll keep that for the workshop. So some closing thoughts I want to share. If there is one habit that I would part with, it would be this. If you change this one thing, let it be this. Before you implement anything, ask some questions like, why does this matter? What breaks if we are wrong with our assumptions? And the end, who else does this affect? Who will wake up at 3 a.m. to answer the pager? And that one habit moves you from execution to ownership. But there's a deeper point. Uh, Senior engineers don't just write better code, they reduce uncertainty. And senior engineers do this reduction in uncertainty by making ambiguity smaller and surface risks earlier. You clarify what others assume, and you create thinking space instead of living in some noise. And you can't do that by working harder. You will do it by optimizing differently. Because as I said in the beginning, the difference between junior and senior engineers often is not technical knowledge. It's what you optimize for. So, the real question is, what are you optimizing for tomorrow morning? Thank you very much. And if you would like to join, please join the workshop. If you're interested in ownership, communication, code reviews, psychology, and time management. Here you have the details. Thanks a lot for your attention. And now I hand over to Cohen.